Book 1, Chapter 5 of The Adventures of Gil Blas of Santillana by Alain René Le Sage, translated by Tobias Smollett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Book 1, Chapter 5, The Arrival of the Banditti in the Subterraneous Retreat, with an account of their pleasant conversation. Just as Captain Rolando had finished his speech, 6 new faces made their appearance in the hall, the lieutenant and 5 privates returning home with their booty. They were hauling in 2 great baskets full of sugar, cinnamon, pepper, figs, almonds, and raisins. The lieutenant gave an account of their proceedings to the captain, and told him they had taken these articles, as well as the sumpter mule, from a grocer of Benevento. An official report having thus been made to the Prime Minister, the grocer's contribution was carried to account, and the next step was to regale after their labours. A large table was set out in the hall. They sent me back to the kitchen, where Dame Leonarda told me what I had to do. I made the best of a bad bargain, finding the luck ran against me, and swallowing my grievances, set myself to wait on my noble masters. I cleaned my plates, set out my sideboard, and brought up my wine. As soon as I announced dinner to be on table, consisting of 2 good black peppery ragouts for the first course, this high and mighty company took their seats. They fell to most voraciously. My place was to wait, and I handed about the glasses with so butler-like an air as to be not a little complimented on my dexterity. The chief entertained them with a short sketch of my story, and praised my parts. But I had recovered from my mania by this time, and could listen to my own panegyric with the humility of an anchorite, or the contempt of a philosopher. They all seemed to take a liking to me, and to think I had dropped from the clouds on purpose to be their cup-bearer. My predecessor was a fool to me. Since his death, the illustrious Leonarda had the honour of presenting nectar to these gods of the lower regions, but she was now degraded, and I had the felicity of being installed in her office. Thus old Hebe being a little the worse for wear, young Ganymede tripped up her heels. A substantial joint of meat after the ragouts at length blunted the edge of their appetites. Eating and drinking went together, so that they soon got into a merry pin, and made a roaring noise. Well done, my lads, all talkers and no listeners. One begins a long story, another cuts a joke, here a fellow bawls, there a fellow sings, and they all seem to be at cross purposes. At last Rolando, tired of a concert in which he could hardly hear the sound of his own voice, let them know that he was maestro di capella, and brought them into better tune. Gentlemen, said he, I have a question to put. Instead of stunning one another with this infernal din, had we not better enjoy a little rational conversation? A thought has just come into my head. Since the happy day that united us, we have never had the curiosity to inquire into each other's pedigrees, or by what chain of circumstances we were each of us led to embrace our present way of life. There would be no harm in knowing who and who are together. Let us exchange confidence. We may find some amusement in it. The lieutenant and the rest, like true heroes of romance, accepted the challenge with the utmost courtesy, and the captain told the first story to the following effect. Gentlemen, you are to know that I am the only son of a rich citizen in Madrid. The day of my birth was celebrated in the family by rejoicings without end. My father, no chicken, thought it a considerable feat to have got an heir, and my mother was kind enough to suckle me herself. My maternal grandfather was still living, a good old man, who did not trouble himself about other people's concerns, but said his prayers and fought his campaigns over and over again, for he had been in the army. Of course I was idolized by these 3 persons, never out of their arms. My early years were passed in the most childish amusements, for fear of hurting my health by application. It will not do, said my father, to hammer much learning into children till time has ripened their understanding. While he waited for this ripening, the season went by. I could neither read nor write, but I made up for that in other ways. My father taught me 1,000 different games. I became perfectly acquainted with cards, was no stranger to dice, and my grandfather set me the example of drawing the long bow, while he entertained me with his military exploits. He sung the same songs repeatedly one after another every day, so that when, after saying 10 or 12 lines after him for 3 months together, I got to boggle through them without missing, the whole family were in raptures at my memory. Neither was my wit thought to be at all less extraordinary, for I was suffered to talk at random, and took care to put in my oar in the most impertinent manner possible. "Oh, the pretty little dear!" exclaimed my father, as if he had been fascinated. My mother made it up with kisses, and my grandfather's old eyes overflowed. I played all sorts of dirty and indecent tricks before them with impunity. Everything was excusable in so fine a boy. An angel could not do wrong. Going on in this manner, I was already in my 12th year without ever having a master. It was high time. But then he was to teach me by fair means. He might threaten, but must not flog me. This arrangement did me but little good, for sometimes I laughed when my tutor scolded. At others I ran with tears in my eyes to my mother or my grandfather, and complained that he had used me ill. The poor devil got nothing by denying it. My word was always taken before his, and he came off with the character of a cruel rascal. One day I scratched myself with my own nails, and set up a howl as if I had been flogged. My mother ran and turned the master out of doors, though he vowed and protested he had never lifted a finger against me. Thus did I get rid of all my tutors, till at last I met with one to my mind. He was a bachelor of Alcala. This was the master for a young man of fashion. Women, wine, and gaming were his principal amusements. It was impossible to be in better hands. He hit the right nail on the head, for he let me do what I pleased, and thus got into the good graces of the family, who abandoned me to his conduct. They had no reason to repent. He perfected me betimes in the knowledge of the world. By dint of taking me about to all his haunts, he gave such a finish to my education, that, barring literature and science, I became an universal scholar. As soon as he saw that I could go alone in the high road to ruin, he went to qualify others for the same journey. During my childhood I had lived at home just as I liked, and did not sufficiently consider that now I was beginning to be responsible for my own actions. My father and mother were a standing jest, yet they were themselves thrown into convulsions at my sallies, and the more ridiculous they were made by them, the more waggish they thought me. In the meantime I got into all manner of scrapes with some young fellows of my own kidney, and as our relations kept us rather too short of cash for the exigencies of so loose a life, we each of us made free with whatever we could lay our hands on in our own families. Finding this would not raise the supplies, we began to pick pockets in the streets at night. As ill luck would have it, our exploits came to the knowledge of the police. A warrant was out against us, but some good-natured friend, thinking it a pity we should be nipped in the bud, gave us a caution. We took to our heels, and rose in our vocation to the rank of highwaymen. From that time forth, gentlemen, with a blessing on my endeavours, I have gone on till I am almost the father of the profession, in spite of the dangers to which it is exposed. Here the captain ended, and it came to the turn of the lieutenant. Gentlemen, extremes are said to meet, and so it will appear from a comparison of our commander's education and mine. My father was a butcher at Toledo. He passed with reason for the greatest brute in the town, and my mother's sweet disposition was not mended by the example. In my childhood they whipped me in emulation of one another. I came in for 1,000 lashes of a day. The slightest fault was followed up by the severest punishment. In vain did I beg for mercy with tears in my eyes, and protest that I was sorry for what I had done. They never excused me, and 9 times out of 10 flogged me for nothing. When I was under my father's lash, my mother, not thinking his arm stout enough, lent her assistance instead of begging me off. The favours I received at their hands gave me such a disgust that I quitted their house before I had completed my 14th year, took the Aragon road, and begged my way to Saragossa. There I associated with vagrants who led a merry life enough, They taught me to counterfeit blindness and lameness, to dress up an artificial wound in each of my legs, and to adopt many other methods of imposing on the credulity of the charitable and humane. In the morning, like actors at rehearsal, we cast our characters and settled the business of the comedy. We had each our exits and our entrances, till in the evening the curtain dropped, and we regaled at the expense of the dupes we had deluded in the day. Wearied, however, with the company of these wretches, and wishing to live in more worshipful society, I entered into partnership with a gang of sharpers. These fellows taught me some good tricks, but Saragossa soon became too hot to hold us, after we had fallen out with a limb of the law, who had hitherto taken us under his protection. We each of us provided for ourselves, and left the devil to take the hindmost. For my part, I enlisted in a brave and veteran regiment, which had seen abundance of service on the king's highway, and I found myself so comfortable in their quarters that I had no desire to change my berth. So that you see, gentlemen, I was very much obliged to my relations for their bad behaviour, for if they had treated me a little more kindly, I might have been a blackguard butcher at this moment, instead of having the honour to be your lieutenant. Gentlemen, interrupted a hopeful young freebooter who sat between the captain and the lieutenant, the stories we have just heard are neither so complicated nor so curious as mine. I peeped into existence by means of a country woman in the neighbourhood of Seville. 3 weeks after she had set me down in this system, a nurse-child was offered her. You are to understand she was yet in her prime, comely in her person, and had a good breast of milk. The young suckling had noble blood in him, and was an only son. My mother accepted the proposal with all her heart, and went to fetch the child. It was entrusted to her care. She had no sooner brought it home than, fancying a resemblance, she conceived the idea of substituting me for the brat of high birth, in the hope of drawing a handsome commission at some future time for this motherly office in behalf of her infant. My father, whose morals were on a level with those of clodhoppers in general, lent himself very willingly to the cheat, so that with only a change of clouts the son of Don Rodrigo de Herrera was packed off in my name to another nurse, and my mother suckled her own and her master's child at once in my little person. They may say what they will of instinct and the force of blood, the little gentleman's parents were very easily taken in. They had not the slightest suspicion of the trick, and were eternally dandling me till I was 7 years old. As it was their intention to make me a finished gentleman, they gave me masters of all kinds, but I had very little taste for their lessons, and above all I detested the sciences. I had at any time rather play with the servants or the stable boys, and was a complete kitchen genius. But tossing up for heads or tails was not my ruling passion. Before 17 I had an itch for getting drunk. I played the devil among the chambermaids, but my prime favourite was a kitchen girl who had infinite merit in my eyes. She was a great bloated horse godmother, whose good case and easy morals suited me exactly. I boarded her with so little circumspection that Don Rodrigo took notice of it. He took me to task pretty sharply, twitted me with my low taste, and for fear the presence of my charmer should counteract his sage counsels, showed the goddess of my devotions the outside of the door. This proceeding was rather offensive, and I determined to be even with him. I stole his wife's jewels, and ravishing my Helen from a laundress of her acquaintance, went off with her in open day, that the transaction might lose nothing in point of notoriety. But this was not all. I carried her among her relations, where I married her according to the rites of the church, as much from the personal motive of mortifying Herrera as from the patriotic enthusiasm of encouraging our young nobility to mend the breed. 3 months after marriage I heard that Don Rodrigo had gone the way of all flesh. The intelligence was not lost upon me. I was at Seville in a twinkling to administer in due form and order to his effects. But the tables were turned. My mother had paid the debt of nature, and in her last agonies had been so much off her guard as to confess the whole affair to the curate of the village and other competent witnesses. Don Rodrigo's son had already taken my place, or rather his own, and his popularity was increased by the deficiency of mine. So that, as the trumps were all out in that hand, I had no particular wish for the present my wife was likely to make me. I joined issue with some desperate blades, with whom I began my trading ventures. The young cutpurse having finished his story, another told us that he was the son of a merchant at Burgos, that in his youth, prompted more by piety than wit, he had taken the religious habit, and professed in a very strict order, and that a few years afterwards he had apostatized. In short, the 8 robbers told their tale one after another, and when I had heard them all, I did not wonder that the destinies had brought them together. The conversation now took a different turn. They brought several schemes upon the carpet for the next campaign, and after having laid down their plan of operations, rose from table and went to bed. They lighted their night candles and withdrew to their apartments. I attended Captain Rolando to his, while I was fiddling about him as he undressed. "Well, Gil Blas," said he, "you see how we live. We are always merry. Hatred and envy have no footing here. We have not the least difference, but hang together just like monks. You are sure, my good lad, to lead a pleasant life here, for I do not think you are fool enough to make any bones about consorting with gentlemen of the road. In what does ours differ from many a more reputable trade? Depend on it, my friend, all men love 2 hands in their neighbour's purse, though only one in their own. Men's principles are all alike. The only difference lies in the mode of carrying them into effect. Conquerors, for instance, make free with the territories of their neighbours. People of fashion borrow and do not pay. Bankers, treasurers, brokers, clerks, and traders of all kinds, wholesale and retail, give ample liberty to their wants to overdraw on their consciences. I shall not mention the hangers-on of the law. We all know how it goes with them. At the same time, it must be allowed that they have more humanity than we have, for as it is often our vocation to take away the life of the innocent for plunder, it is sometimes theirs for fee and reward to save the guilty." End of Book 1, Chapter 5.